Linda Davis, who we joked with earlier, that she's always the last person people think about calling when they're selling their business. And then we put her last in order on the panelists. So last but not least.
Thanks, Glenn. It is really funny that I was put last on the list, and most people would think like, oh, a financial advisor, I only need to call them when I have a pot of money to manage, right? But really, it's a much more successful experience when you call us further ahead of time, if you have the right advisor. There's a lot of financial advisors that just do investment management. My firm is really focused on providing a long-term advice so that when you're thinking ahead. So we overlap a little bit with Glenn on the what do you want your life to look like after your business, and we'll talk about that. So you got to begin with the end in mind, right? What's your long-term vision? And then really thinking about your goals. So we last year I had a business owner was getting ready to sell a business. I'd been working with him for years. We'd been modeling different ideas of what he needed to sell for, and I knew they were really philanthropic. And we took shares of his business and moved them into a donor advised fund before the sale. He didn't have to pay any capital gains on any of the money moved in there. We were able to create this long-term pot of money for philanthropy in the future, save him tax money, and accomplish his goals. And if if we hadn't had those discussions years before and been modeling them, he might not have known that that was an option before he sold his business. So having a team of advisors, like all of the people you see here today, we all serve a different role as that advice that you're getting. This same client, a lot of people were worried capital gains rates were going to increase with the Biden administration. And so I was helping model for him, what was he going to net out under current capital gains rules? If he sold a piece now, because he was looking at selling a piece to a PE firm, what if it was only 40%? What if it was 60%? What would it look like a few years later if capital gains rates rose? So, if you have someone like me on your team, we're modeling out those things so that you can make good decisions. And the answer was sell as much as you can before the end of the year in case those capital gains change. And then figuring out, what can you roll into the next thing? If you're working with a PE firm, you might have the opportunity to roll a piece of the deal over into the new company, which can be a great opportunity to build wealth. And really understanding like how much risk you need to take off the table now versus what you're rolling in is important. And having an advisor that really understands what your and your spouse's and your family's long-term goals are so that they can model that out for you and help you make those decisions makes for a much more satisfied experience, successful experience. And in the end, the whole goal is that you don't look back with any regrets. So there's really a lot more to these transactions. Today, I'm going to have a much more focused presentation on just how to figure out, what you need to sell for to make sure that you're covered. But there's a lot of other aspects to these deals that we're often involved in as a team of advisors with the other people that you see presenting here today. So how did I get into this role? I actually started off my career in corporate finance, and my husband and I in our early 20s, I had a master's in finance and undergraduate degree in finance, but honestly, I didn't know anything about personal finance. I was working like 70 hours a week, and we decided to hire an advisor to build out a plan. We were getting ready to start a family, and this guy he just didn't get it. He couldn't run the scenarios that I wanted, and later I found out that we were put in these really expensive investments that really weren't aligned with our goals. And I felt kind of stupid and, and a little bit embarrassed that I didn't ask the right questions up front. So I decided to switch my career, leave corporate finance and go into personal finance and work with individuals and families. And over the years, I realized that I had a really unique skill set. Working in corporate finance for those years and working in high tech really made me understand comp packages, how businesses run, and it allowed me a skill set that could really marry the business finance and the personal finance. So our firm now is really focused on working with entrepreneurs and executives who have complex planning needs. That's really what we do best. And, I really felt it was important that I walked in their shoes. And I always wanted to start my own firm. So in 2017, I left the firm I was with to start a firm that was just focused really on business owners and executives. We've been growing fast. I think it's an area that, a lot of people really need some good advice so that they can maximize their wealth. And we really enjoy doing that for families. So we act as a family office essentially for successful families. And a lot of this happens beforehand. Like Glenn was mentioning, I started working with Glenn and his wife before they sold their business, right? They didn't have a lot of assets because they put everything that they had into the business. And that was really important to me, to build a company that could enter the relationship early on. So it's not just about managing investments, it's really about giving good advice, and protecting business owners as well, building that moat and making sure that as they build that wealth, they can make confident decisions moving forward. So we were able to do that planning, and I'll sort of walk you through it as we walk through the rest of these slides. Oh, except for we have a polling question. Let's do this first.
All right.
So do you know how much income you need to fund your lifestyle?
And I'll have to give credit where credit is due. Is all the credit is my wife is deserving of all the credit of bringing Mindy into the equation ahead of time. I just did my entrepreneur thing, and she's the planner in the family and also a partner in the business. So.
Well, you know, my view, Glenn, I think one of the reasons I like working with entrepreneurs is I love that growth and innovative mindset. And we all have something that we can bring to the world. And the stuff that I do is really important for you and your family, but it really takes away the energy. It sucks. It's an energy suck, right? Like, you don't want to do this stuff, but you know that it's important so that, you know, you don't miss things along the way, just like talking to anybody here. And what I really like, I read this book, The Big Leap, and it's about like, how do you focus on your genius? Well, you hire other people to do the things that either you don't want to do or you're not good at, but are important. And that's kind of where I see my role working with entrepreneurs. All right, 35%. That's great. Tracking budget to and having things organized, reviewing statements. So 41%, that's pretty normal. And no, I know there's money in my checking account, but I have no idea what we spend. So kind of across the board here. You know, I think most people, when they're busy running a business, they're not tracking their everyday expenses. And as we start to earn more income, there's more money to spend. So I'm glad to see that over 70% or 75% at least have their arms around how much they're spending per year. That's going to make this whole process a lot easier for you. All right, so what's a freedom point? Really, it's what kind of portfolio do you need to make work optional that can create enough income for you and your family to support the lifestyle that you want? That's what we're trying to figure out. All right, so step one, like Glenn talked about at the beginning, what is your vision for after you exit the business? You know, there's been studies that have been done that entrepreneurs where they and their spouse both have long-term business goals and family goals are much more satisfied in every different area of their life. So something that's important to me is to develop a vision of what you want that future to look like. And you need to think about, you know, what should be in it. There's a lot of expenses. We called them add backs earlier, right? That you run through your business now that you're going to need to consider later. So when you think about what you want your life to look like, and then we start to think about, well, how much does that life cost? What is it? How much income am I going to need to generate for that lifestyle? We need to really make sure that we haven't missed things that are currently running through the business, that we're thinking of things down the road. And so before we can do anything, we really have to begin with the end in mind and know what we want to exit with and know what we want our life to look like. And then after that, we're really taking a look at what resources do you currently have? Like Glenn mentioned in his case, and this is pretty typical with entrepreneurs and myself included, you know, when we're growing a business, we're reinvesting a lot of our income back into the business, right? So someone looks at our tax return and they think that we're earning a lot, but we're not taking home a lot, right? We're running it right back into the business and trying to grow it. So understanding that is really important. But if you're able to save outside of the business, whether it's in like a cash balance plan that was mentioned earlier, or other retirement accounts or brokerage accounts, or maybe you own a whole bunch of real estate that's creating passive income, understanding what other resources you have to meet those goals is really step two. Because if you have outside resources, either passive income, other platforms, things like that, you're not going to need as high of a selling price when you go out to a buyer. Step three is really understanding what other costs exist around selling your business. So I'm sure you can guess half of it today, right? You're going to need someone like Matt. You're going to need a legal team. You're going to need a CPA. You're going to need someone like Calvin. There's going to be cost to selling your business. There's going to be taxes. So, once you figure out how much money you need, you need to tack on all the additional costs to figure out what price you have to sell for.
Don't
To
forget the
net out what
lawyers.
it's going to cost you to live. Lawyers, is that what you said, Glenn?
Don't forget the lawyers.
Yeah. And the lawyers are important. And, a lot of people like to think of these things as an expense. And we have it listed as a cost, but honestly, a lot of these are investments like we've talked about today. And I can't tell you how many business owners I've talked to that said that their M&A person like Matt got them a much higher price than they could have ever gotten on their own or even ever imagined. And having everything well organized made for an easier due diligence and a much faster sale. I had a client sell a business in about 2 months at the end of last year. It was a really fast sale. And it went, it was fatiguing. I think at the end, they were sleeping an hour a night, but they got it done because they had the right team. And you really need the right team there. So think of it as an investment, not just a cost. And so the step 4 is once you figured all those things out, you can calculate what kind of price is going to bring you, financial freedom, is going to make work optional. Now, most entrepreneurs I know are not going to sit under a palm tree and be happy for the rest of their life, but they may want to take a couple of years off or travel, internationally, or maybe just fund their kids' college. So giving you the freedom to have some space to breathe or start a new adventure is often important.
So, Mindy, we have a question for you. Before and during COVID, how often do you contact your clients?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say it really varies on the type of client. We send out typically monthly or bi-monthly communications that are more general to everybody. During COVID, let me just say, I was doing webinars on PPP like every other week. I spent all of my weekends writing updates to what was happening to PPP to send out to my clients and what was available for them. So last March and April, I literally just worked 10 hours a day, 7 days a week to keep my clients informed with everything that was happening. But honestly, most of my clients did really well through that. We helped them through the PPP, submitting all the forms for PPP and now forgiveness, and ran through other opportunities that they had. So some of my clients I talked to monthly. Some of my clients, most business owners we're talking to at least quarterly, I guess is the right answer to the question. It really depends on what a client's needs are. All right, so how much after-tax income do you need? I have some pictures here because these are often the things that our clients are thinking about, right? They've put everything into the business. They've taken somewhat of a minimal salary and they're just waiting to live their best life, right? They probably haven't funded their kids' college education. They're not sure how to do that or how much to put in that. So we have this big liquidation event that's coming. And they're trying to figure out what's possible. Can they buy that second home, right? How should they buy that second home that they want to really make those family memories at? They're ready to upgrade their home, right? How much is that going to cost? What are all the extra things that they're not thinking about, like extra utilities, extra property tax, extra all that stuff that's going to be there forever? Maybe they want to live abroad for a while, or they haven't had the opportunity to do the traveling that they've wanted to, and they want to build a much bigger travel budget. So you can think about what your annual expenses are today, but being able to model some of these really large purchases and figure out the best way, like maybe you want to use margin to fund some of a low cost mortgage per se, or to bridge a loan somewhere. You can put 5 years worth of gifting sort of into a 529 plan for your kids and do a big lump sum upfront investment so that it can grow and be there later. So helping clients think through what are their goals, what are their priorities, and how they can accomplish that. And Glenn can share, in his situation, we were working ahead of time so that, like he said, as soon as his deal was done, they had plans and knew exactly what they were doing, and they could execute all those with confidence. We knew where money was going. We knew what we could say yes to or what we needed to say no to. And all of that was determined up front so that they could just really enjoy and relax after that happened. All right, this really beautiful, colorful graph. So really what you're looking at here is withdrawal rates. So how much lifetime income can you depend on? You hear this a lot in retirement. What portfolio value do I need so that I never have to work again? You hear it in the FIRE movement. And often you hear this, I need 4% withdrawal. So over here on the right, you see WR equals and then a percentage. WR means withdrawal rate. And what it really means is what percentage can you take out of your portfolio without running out of money? And I know it says a 30-year retirement on here, but some of these lower withdrawal rates, that would last you for your lifetime. The concept to think about here is, how can you take income out of your portfolio without really eroding the principal so that it can continue to grow and create more income for you later? So looking at this, let's use the 5%, the light blue line, the 5% withdrawal rate there. And what you're looking at, the horizontal axis is the stock allocation of your portfolio. So over here is 100 on the far right. That's having 100% stock portfolio. Most of our clients don't have 100% stock portfolio, though some do. All the way down to all bonds and no stocks in your portfolio. And you can see, and then the vertical axis is probability of failure. And what that really means is that you run out of money. So probability of failure is that your money does not last your lifetime. So you can see that the more stocks you have, the probability of failure goes down, or we could just say the probability of success goes up. And that just means the smaller amount of money that you're taking out of your portfolio, the longer it's likely to last, right? A pretty easy concept. The magic number you're trying to figure out is, how much can I take out safely without worrying about outliving my assets, essentially, right? Nobody wants to eat cat food and live out of a paper bag later on, right? We want to know what we need to say no to today, so that we don't end up in that situation later on. So if we use 5% here, a 5% withdrawal rate, what that means is, assume you had a $5 million portfolio. That means you could take $250,000 out of the portfolio safely per year. And what you're seeing here, this little block over here that says 23, that's the optimal spot for success with a 5% withdrawal rate. So it's essentially saying you have a 77% success rate of never running out of money. And I'm looking for anything really over 70%, to be honest, of never running out of money, assuming that your portfolio is 70% stocks and 30% bonds. And I would argue that if you have a financial advisor you're working with who's monitoring this, who says to you, hey, dude, the market's been down for like 3 years, you're not going on that vacation next year, just pull in a little bit next year, you can increase that success rate. So if you're working with someone who can help guide you along the way, because life never, looks like we think it's going to look like, right? You're not going to just need $250,000 every year for the rest of your life. You're going to need a new car, or you're going to buy a boat, or you're going to buy a house. It just changes year by year. But if you have someone who can be looking at these things with you and guiding you, you will end up with a more successful outcome. The other thing is that most people don't withdraw the same percentage every year, right? Most people that I work with who either retire or sell a business and take a few years off, they have a few years up front where they're like, woohoo, just got out. I'm gonna get all the things that I've always wanted. So they might have a higher withdrawal rate for a few years, and then that withdrawal rate goes down. So it's not as simple as we're going to make it seem today, but by using these kind of factors, you can gain an idea if you're in the ballpark, right? Do I need 4%? Do I need 5%? If you need 7% out of your portfolio, so if you need 7% out of your portfolio, and maybe even more than that, it's likely not going to last your lifetime. You've got a less than 50% chance that money is going to be there at the end. So this just gives you an idea of whether your expectations for how much you can pull out of your portfolio are high or are low. And if you have a higher tolerance to risk, you can probably have a higher withdrawal rate. If you came to me and said, I took risk in my business, Mindy, and I see this all the time. Business owners take risk in their business, but they don't want to take risk somewhere else because they can't control that, right? We don't have control over the stock market. So sometimes I'll find that people are really risky in their business, but they want to be very conservative in their investment portfolios. And that's absolutely fine. It's just that you might have to settle on a lower withdrawal rate to have financial security. All right, so let's go through some of the calculations on how you can figure out what your freedom point is. So let's assume for today that you need after-tax income of 250 grand. So that means like when you add up all your expenses, your mortgage, travel, everything like that, it comes up to 250 grand a year. So at around 250 grand, your effective tax rate, not your marginal, not like what you pay on each new dollar, but your average tax rate would be around 20%. So how much do you really need to earn to get 250,000 after you pay taxes? So what we do is we take the pre-tax income needed, that 250,000, and we divide it by 1 minus the tax rate, which is 0.8. So that's 0.2, which is 1 minus the tax rate. And so you get 312,000. So we need 312,000 so that you can pay for 250,000 worth of expenses, essentially. So what size portfolio do you need to have that much income per year? And so we're not right now thinking about like putting lump sums in colleges or buying bigger houses. We're keeping the math really simple. So how much do you need? So at a 4% withdrawal rate, what you do is you take the amount of after-tax income or pre-tax income you need times 25. So you get 7.8 million. If it's a 5% withdrawal rate, you multiply by 20. So these are both pretty reasonable withdrawal rates that I use with my clients. If you're a really conservative investor, use 4%. If you're comfortable with the 70% stock portfolio, use 5%. Multiply by 20. So we need somewhere between 6.25 million and 7.8 million to have 250,000 of income for the rest of our lives and never have to work again, right? Make work optional. So let's assume that you have 750,000 already saved, either in retirement investments or in a brokerage account somewhere or an inheritance that you've gotten. So you have other assets out there. So we can subtract those from what you need up here. So now you need somewhere between 5.5 million to 7.1 million. So when you walk away from this deal and you pay Uncle Sam and you pay the lawyers and everything like that, you need to have in your bank account between 5.5 and 7.1 million. All right, let's head to the next one.
Actually, we have a great question that just came in, and I've asked Mindy this question. Are these numbers different if you live in Florida or New Hampshire where there are no state taxes?
So it would affect your tax rate. Yeah. So I live in Florida, I live in New Hampshire. I grew up in Florida. Those are great places to live, right? With no state taxes. Some things that you can think about, I'll just put this out here. You know, I was doing some estate planning with a client last year and we were doing you can do an asset protection trust. Even if you're a Massachusetts resident, you can put together a trust in New Hampshire where New Hampshire is the state of residence. So if it makes sense from an estate planning standpoint to do that, sometimes clients will do that and they will avoid the New Hampshire tax. There's a lot of other rules that you have to abide to, so they're not always a perfect solution. But yes, you would need to add 5% for Massachusetts to answer your question to that tax rate. So the pre-tax income needed here, would be 0.75 you'd be dividing by. So you'd have a bigger number, right? Because you have to pay mass income tax. And so when you're thinking about where you're going to live, or when you're going to sell your business, where you're going to live, you might consider what state you're currently living in, for sure. So this is the last one, and then we can go through questions. Because this is a really simplified way to do this. Let's say we're using the 4% withdrawal strategy. So we need about 7.1 million. When we look at transaction fees, people ask, what do I need to plan for? And honestly, it varies. So transaction fees are going to be your M&A fees, your CPA fees, your legal fees, all the team members that are involved in your transaction. And it could be as low as 6 or 8%, or as high as 15%. It really depends on the complexity of your business and the type of business that you're in. So I just had someone sell and his fees were only 6% of the transaction, but it was a smaller business. It was pretty streamlined and it was being swallowed up into another similar company. So it really depends on what you're looking at and what type of business you're in, but we're going to use that as an estimate for today. And then estimated taxes. So the taxes that I have here are the estimated capital gains taxes. And if you're in Massachusetts, add 5%, absolutely. So, or if you're in another state, like Maine has income tax as well. So you would want to add their income tax to it. But for today, I'm just going to use the 20% capital gains rate. Now that's the higher of the two capital gains rates, but if you're selling a $7 million business, you're going to be in the higher rate, right? And then what I'm doing here, so this is about 32% of fees if you add the 12% and 20% together. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the amount that we need and I'm dividing it by 1 minus the total amount that I'm going to owe to other people. So the 0.32 is just the 32% that you see here. and I'm taking 7.1 million divided by 1 minus all the fees that I'm going to have to pay. And so I need to sell my business for 10.4 million. So I've already got $750,000 saved. And to get 250,000 a year in income, I need to sell my business for 10.4 million, right? And then think about, like, we talked about college costs and philanthropy and all those kinds of things. There's a lot of other planning that you might be able to do ahead of time to make that more tax efficient. This client that we just moved about 750,000 of the sale price into a donor advised fund that no capital gains are going to be due on. He's going to have to do a valuation on that, and it's probably going to cost him about 10 grand or 12 grand, but saved him a boatload in capital gains tax, and he's a Massachusetts resident. So, just understanding some of these different strategies. And one of the things that I pride myself in is bringing other team members in, bringing a Glenn in, bringing a Matt in, bringing other resources in. I think having the right team of advisors. Sometimes, we don't know everything. We know a lot, and we've been through a number of transactions, and that's how we learn, right? By fire. But I think having the right team of advisors can really help you exit and feel really good about the exit, and then begin living the life that you were hoping for, that you have put thought into. Because I just read a paper out from Yale that someone shared with me about how hard it is for business owners once they exit, and how difficult a time they have because they haven't done the proper planning for thinking about what's next. Because they were just spending all their time in their business, and that's pretty common. The other thing that we help clients through is, maybe your business is producing a lot of income, and often people don't think about, like, well, what's my business really worth, like, in income to me? Like, maybe it's not the right time to sell. Maybe what you really need to do is work with Glenn, create a higher level management team who can run the business, that'll give you more freedom and more time with your family. That will also increase the value of the business, so that later when you sell, not only have you increased your income and made it so that you don't have to be there all the time, you've also increased the value of the business. So later when you go to sell, it'll be more valuable. So I think just getting some outside perspective from some different people who've seen it done a lot of different ways is helpful. All right. I know that we're closing in, I think, on time.
So we do have one more question.
Yep. So putting everything in a DAF can avoid capital gains up to 50% of AGI. Yeah, I wouldn't put everything in a DAF. A DAF is a donor advised fund. And so I wouldn't, but so you do have to have the adjusted gross income. Exactly. So in the year that you do it, you have to have the adjusted gross income. The client that I'm talking about was selling about a $50 million business. So to put $1 million into a donor advised fund we were going to meet all of those requirements, but you absolutely have to make sure, that you're being smart about things. The other thing, like we had with a client last year, is we had a client who was selling a business, and between they had phantom stock and things like that, it was netting out to really having no income for the company because of the way the phantom stock was going to be paid out and the way that the deal was done. And there was a whole bunch of capital gains income. And we were doing this donor advised fund, and we thought, gosh, it's only going to save us the capital gains income. We're also not going to get the deduction on ordinary income. So what we ended up doing was we converted all of their IRAs to Roth, and we used the donor advised fund deduction to offset the Roth conversions at ordinary income rates. So there's just a lot of strategic things that you can do if you have someone who really understands all your moving parts.